Hey guys, so I'm about to launch a live stream where I talk about the different ways of generating wealth in your 20s and 30s and which one is the best. And the secret is that increasing your rate of savings as a percentage of your income is the best by a huge margin. Without going into all the math, in terms of both impact and certainty, savings is the best. Now, that being said, there's a lot of context and nuance and understanding you have to bring to that conclusion. And the reason why is because people spend money for very different reasons, right? So people with very low incomes spend a huge portion of their income because they have to survive, right? Like there's a minimum price floor that you have to meet in order to exist. Um, and so once you start moving up into like the middle incomes, then people are spending a lot of money a lot of times because they're stressed out, they're trying to jockey for status, things like this. They're basically unhappy with their situation and they're spending money in order to feel better about themselves. Now, is that a wise use of money? Probably not. In general, using money to buy things to cope instead of actually solving your problems is not going to be a good use of money. That being said, you need to have a certain level of empathy for these people because they're unhappy, right? And a lot of times there are certain problems that you can't control. You might be able to avoid those problems by moving into a different situation, but if you leave your current situation, you might be giving up a lot of benefits unique to that situation. And so you have to have a little bit of compassion for people when they're blowing all their money because at the end of the day, they're in a bad spot, both financially as well as emotionally. So, I just want to say that, just because I say, oh, you got to focus on your savings, right? If you're trying to build wealth, no matter what your income is. I also understand at the same time why these get rich schemes and stuff like that, why more people spend time on the internet consuming content related to how to increase your rate of return, even though that's way less effective. Because being able to increase your rate of return allows you to continue consuming your coping mechanisms and, in theory, get you to your financial goal. In reality, though, unfortunately, that's not the case. So, you have to have some understanding there. And then there's another thing. So that's people who spend too much money as a relative share of their income if you're going to maximize your wealth generation strategy. There is another group, and this is the group that I belong to, which has its pros and its cons. But these are people who actually don't spend enough money. These are people who are saving way too much money. And so, kind of to illustrate that point, I obviously live in New York City. I lived here for almost 3 years. So I make a lot of income for my age, but I'm not making millions of dollars a year or anything like that. And obviously, New York, I don't need to say this, but New York is a place with a very high cost of living and a lot of taxes. I save over 50% of my pre-tax income living in New York City, um, which is crazy. I will say this: like when I first moved here in my first year, I spent less than $5,000 on all personal expenditures except for rent and taxes. So, flying back home to see family for Thanksgiving and Christmas, buying birthday gifts, and Christmas gifts and stuff like that, Valentine's Day gifts for my girlfriend, all that stuff, utilities, everything except for rent and taxes. I spent less than $5,000 my first year living in New York City. And obviously, you might be asking, how the heck did you do that? And it's pretty simple. I just didn't buy anything for myself at all, pretty much. And I adopted very extreme strategies for saving money, like instead of dry cleaning, wearing sweaters and overshirts and stuff. That way people couldn't tell that my clothes were super wrinkled at work, right? And basically wearing the same things over and over, pretty much eating like one meal a day and getting that comped on the company dime. Not really having any social life whatsoever. If I ever did something fun, it would have to be something free. So I spent a lot of time going to the park, not taking the subway unless absolutely necessary, like getting to the airport, so like walking sometimes hours to do something fun. That was also free, and the reason why I was doing that was because I have a very unhealthy relationship with money. I still do. I'm working on it. But just to tell you a story here, I had lived in New York for about a year and a half, and I was really stressed out and depressed, not in a good spot. And, I was kind of self aware that I was coping, but I was like, fuck it, I just want to cope. And so I went to the grocery store and I bought myself one of those little containers of orange juice. It was like less than $3.60. It was like somewhere between 350, 360. It's crazy that I remember that, right? But that's how much it cost. And I bought it, went back home, and I drank it, and I felt a little bit better, But then, pretty shortly after, I was like riddled with guilt. I felt like I was being very irresponsible with my money, that could have been used better elsewhere. All these things, all these negative feelings, kind of like, oh, you're so weak, things like that, and then I kind of had this moment of kind of like self awareness where I was like, if you can't buy yourself like one nice thing, like it's not even unhealthy. It's not like cigarettes or something, right? It's like orange juice. Like it's actually probably good for you. If you can't buy yourself an orange juice every year and a half without feeling immensely guilty, then there's something wrong with you. Like your relationship with money is not healthy. And so, I've been working on that, and it didn't make the guilt go away. Like I still had these guilty feelings for months afterwards. And yeah, so basically, I remember it was not too long after that I realized that my passive income had exceeded my like active expenditures, and so that was like I had this moment of like this really like freeing moment where I was like, I can spend money on things just that I want, and it won't affect my overall principle, right? And it was this crazy liberating, very ecstatic feeling actually. Like this weight was falling off my shoulders, kind of thing. And I remember thinking to myself, I can spend $1,000 a month absolutely, stress free. I should have absolutely no problem spending $1,000 a month just on whatever I want to buy for myself, right? So then, a week later, I went out on a weekend and I was just like going around the different shops and the stores, right, in New York City, just going up and down the streets looking for things to buy. Because I was really excited to do that, right? Kind of like for the first time in my life, just going out and buying stuff. And I remember like getting kind of wigged out because I trained myself for, over 20 years. Whenever you see something, first of all, just to say, don't buy it. No, not allowed. But then also like coming up with all these reasons why, I shouldn't buy it. Like, oh, you're never going to use that. Oh, that's silly. Oh, that's overpriced anyway. Whatever the excuses are. And so I remember going around the city and I was like, I don't know what I want, like I don't know what to buy. Like it was a weird feeling, right? Because I was like, you're in the center of consumerism, right? Like New York City, you're surrounded by advertisements, you're surrounded by shops, you're surrounded by products. People are spending the money like crazy here, and it's like, and you can't find a thing that you want to buy. And then I was like, well, I did go to this antique store, right? And there was this really beautiful table, and I thought to myself, oh, that's a gorgeous table. I'd love to have it. It's like $7,000. My monthly budget's $1,000, so I'm not going to buy it. And then I remember thinking to myself, I was like, well, if you're going to give yourself $1,000 a year, that's $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. So if that table's 7,000, you could just buy that table and like not buy something for 7 months, right? And then I was like, oh, that's a great idea. Then I started thinking of all these excuses like, oh well, I can't fit it in my apartment. What if like when I move out of the city it chips, and then all these things. So then I basically didn't buy it. Somebody else bought it a couple months afterwards, and I don't know if I regret it or not, but I definitely like that table a lot. And you know, doesn't matter. So anyway, I guess my point is I've been working on it a little bit. Nowadays, almost I'd say like 2 or 3 times a week, not a week, 2 or 3 times a month. I'll go to like the grocery store and I'll get myself a steak or something like for dinner, just to have something nice. And that's been good. I will say though that I think I still have a lot of, and the thing is like I do feel like that's a waste of money still. Like it's not really bringing me anything, but I'm trying to just get comfortable doing it because one of the things I've learned is that, I started looking into what does upper class mean, in America. Um, and there's kind of like two upper classes, right? There's like the political or the ruling class, and then there's like the upper class in terms of like the rich people. And how you get into those classes is different, right? Where like if you want to be a part of the upper like ruling class, like the political class, it's really about how many people you control. And so like a CEO of a company, they actually do have elements of that. Where like if you are the CEO of a two-person company, nobody cares, right? But if you're the CEO of like a 10,000 person company, you're controlling 10,000 people, like that's like a real amount of people that you're controlling. It's still not as impressive as like say like a governor, right, who's controlling in theory, an entire state or something like that. And so, or a senator, right? Like once you have these like once you're able to direct the lives of, bigger and bigger groups of people, you move up that, hierarchy of status in the like control uh, political ruling class sense of the word. And then you have like the upper wealthy class. And that's really about how much you spend. It's not actually how much you have, it's how much you spend, which is a very interesting concept to me. But I understand it now because I'm starting to like understand how relationships work between people. Like there is this element of mutual benefit that's very important. And so like for instance, like I have a lot of capital at this point. But like I don't have any status because of it, because I don't spend any money, right? Like the guy who has less money than me but spends more money than me is going to be perceived and treated like he's upper class by, his peers, the opposite sex, and, business owners, politicians, whatever. Because like if you just are a dragon and you sit on your wealth and you just hoard it, nobody actually will give you that status. Like you don't get status through accumulating wealth. You get status by spending predominantly your income. And so if that's what you're going for, we're kind of moving away from wealth. Now we're going for status. It's really about the income. And or, if you have wealth, how much of that wealth you're willing to spend on just things. Whether that be clothes, furniture, housing, dinners, events, vacations, whatever the case may be, right? Um, but yeah, and so that really kind of goes into a concept that I haven't touched on yet in this channel, but it's true. There's really like two major groups of people. There's not all people, but two major groups of people. And that's the group of people who are motivated by pleasure. And then there's another group of people who are motivated by freedom. And so the people who just stack wealth like crazy, like myself, who save a lot of money, we're motivated by freedom. Whereas people who spend a lot of their money, even if they make a lot of money, assuming they're not just coping, even if they are coping though, to be honest, they're motivated more by pleasure. And so the vast majority of human beings are motivated by pleasure, not freedom. And that's interesting, right? And so if you want to, I mean, if you're somebody like me and you probably are if you're watching this far into the video on like a small YouTube channel, um, you're probably motivated mostly by freedom because you're relating to these things I'm saying. And if that's you, just know that if you want to develop like a real social circle, and like, if you're a guy, which you probably are, I think there are much more guys motivated by freedom than women as a percentage basis. Um, for whatever reason, I don't know. But, if that's you, then just know that like you're never gonna be that socially successful. You're not gonna have like a lot of like social status unless you're willing to spend money. And even if you're going for like the political ruling class status thing, that's still the case. It's not just like the wealth status thing. That's also the ruling class status thing, because there's really only two ways to control people, right? There's forcing them at like gunpoint or whatever, right? Like coercing them physically, and there's also incentivizing them monetarily. Like those are the two major mechanisms. There's another one which is propaganda, which is when you brainwash people to act in your interest, right? Okay, so that is certainly real. The only thing is that the vast majority of people are not in the propaganda business. Um, Companies are starting to do that more. Like when you start looking at like these like HR departments and marketing departments who are actually trying to develop a culture that's a little bit more culty. um, that's what that is. Like they're trying to propagandize their own employee base, and that's really smart because that's like one of the third like levers of ruling class power, right? But predominantly, you're not going to be able to propagandize like random people that well. That's really like you need to have institutional authority and the ability to generate consensus, stuff like that, in order to really effectively propagandize a group of people. So, anyway, that kind of got off into a tangent. But the point remains is this. I'm going to make this video about, the importance of saving money. However, if you're somebody watching this far in the video, and you're already saving a ton of your money, you actually need to go the opposite direction. Like, for the benefit, unless you really know for sure that like you really dislike society, other people, and your version of freedom is like getting away from it all. And that's legit desire if that's really what you want to do and that's your plan and everything. But just be very careful that is what you want to do, and know that if you want something else, that you're going to have to eventually loosen up the floodgates a little on your savings. And you are going to have to do that. And I think that's what I want to do. Eventually, like having like a social circle and doing all that stuff. So, and that's why I'm trying to get more comfortable with spending my money, because otherwise I'm never going to be able to do it. So, anyway, that's just a thing. Like, don't take the live stream as an excuse to just continue to squirrel away money. And if you have like psychological baggage, I guess, around spending money, like I think just for your own sake, it is worth like getting through that a little bit. I definitely think the way I was raised, number one, saving money was extremely important. And number two, just like the way I was raised, a lot of times if I was doing an activity that was like supposed to be fun, it was made not fun. And so I started like discounting pleasure in aggregate. And so then I was kind of like, okay, this is stupid. And I felt very like constrained. I felt like I couldn't really do anything ever. And so I became very driven towards freedom and very driven away from pleasure. And so I kind of went into this extreme, which has had its pros and cons, right? Like a pro is that like if I wanted to stop working, I almost certainly could. I'd have to reduce, the quality of my life. I wouldn't live in New York City. I would go somewhere else. But I could definitely do it. And I was able to do that after basically working for 3 years, which is pretty nuts. But at the same time, like, I could only do that if I become a hermit and give up on a lot. So, yeah, pros and cons, I'd say. Anyway, I'm going to end the video here. I'll probably talk about this kind of topic again in the future. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe. Yeah, catch you in the next one.